I'll talk just to test the audio. I don't think anything.
Thank you, Zach.
I had exactly the same thought running through my head.
You're focusing right now? Yeah, okay. Maybe because I was sharing my screen. Everybody's audio got muted? I don't know what's up with that.
I'm getting a really deep echo from you now, though. Like, it sounds cool, but I don't think it's intentional.
Yeah, I bet it's picking up both your microphone and then somehow it's playing through your screen share as well or something.
I'm gonna drop off and come back to see that.
Yeah, now I see what you mean by the echo.
How about now? Is there still an echo?
No, that's much better.
So much better, yeah.
All right, let me see. So I was having problems. I can't share my screen and unmute at the same time. Oh yeah, if I check this, maybe. Now you can hear me and see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Hi, everybody. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Make sure everyone's typed their names and affiliations into the notes doc here. And has anyone not joined us before? Do we have any new friends here? Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm new. I'm Sterling, work on Gradle Build Tool, just coming in to see what's going on.
I don't think I've joined before, Dustin, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Jory Burson. I'm a program director for the Linux Foundation, and OpenSSF is my favorite project. I'll be joining the community calls quite a bit just to support you all in your work and to assist with basically any interaction or any support you might need from the Linux Foundation to help grow this community, to help talk about and get the word out about what you all are doing and that kind of thing. So please hit me up on Slack or email if you need a thing in the world.
I haven't joined previously as well. This is my first meeting. This is Lakshmi, product manager for Central at Sonotype.
This is my first meeting here as well. Joel Orlina with Sonotype, and I'm part of the Central team over here as well. Been around Central for a while, so it's high time I showed up here.
Hello, this is Eric Tice with Wipro Technologies. I lead the Technical Consulting and Center of Excellence within our OSPO. I'm in a number of the other OpenSSF groups, but this is the first one I've come to for this particular topic.
Nice to meet you, folks. I'm Mickey. I'm leading the Sneak Labs team, researching the topic of supply chain security. And this is the first time I'm joining this working group.
This is my first meeting as well. I'm Jenny. I work at Shopify with Jacques, and we're mostly focused on the Ruby Gems ecosystem.
Hi, folks. This is Tracy Miranda. I work at ChainGuard. I'm heading up open source and colleague of Zach's. So nice to meet you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Asaf from JFrog Security. First time here.
Hi, I'm Shachar, also from JFrog Security, working on supply chain security, Artifactory, etc. First time here. Good to be here.
Meeting is being recorded.
Start the trash talking now. Is that what happens? Recording.
Okay, Dustin, are you still having audio challenges?
I think I am. Can folks still hear me?
You sound great.
Yeah, sorry. It just like completely dropped off. I couldn't hear anyone reconnect. So I'm going to try not sharing my screen. If folks, I'll drop the link to the notes doc and you can follow along that. It seems to be the problem. Sorry, I just missed all the introductions. Didn't hear anything. But welcome everyone that's new. So yeah, are we ready to move on? Sorry, I'm not exactly sure where we're at.
We're just at the the housekeeping item.
Yep. So one quick note of housekeeping. Jory's created a shared Google Drive for us in the Linux Foundation workspace account that we can use to store any documents or things that we might create. So this notes doc is in there. The matrix that we, the survey that we created last time is in there as well. And Zach's new doc on integrating Sigstore. And so anything that we create in the future, we should create in here. And a note for people who might have more restricted corp email accounts. If you create it with your corp account, like your google.com account, if you're a Googler maybe, permissions are will be retained in that doc. So try to create it with an external account if you can. Yeah, any other housekeeping things? Okay, cool. Let's move on to Jacques.
Yeah, actually, I might flick this to Jenny.
Okay, so yeah, Jacques put a brief note down on the agenda saying that we introduced the new MFA policy to Ruby Gems, so that just got accepted. So our policy right now is we are trying to require MFA on sign-in to the top 100 most downloaded gem accounts. So if anyone, I know NPM also introduced a similar policy. So if we want to get, I don't know, connected on that, that would be cool. Or if any other ecosystems want to do the same.
I can speak really quickly to that from NPM, and we've had great success with the program. We're similarly only enforcing for login, although people do have the option of using it for publish as well. And I dropped my email address in the chat. I'm happy to talk more about that offline if you'd like.
Awesome, sounds great.
IPI is also going to do this. We are partnering with at least one security key vendor to do a giveaway for maintainers. The issue is we're having supply chain issues with the security keys, so that's been on hold for now. But the current plan is for 1% of the top packages on PyPI to have a MFA mandate. So that would be about 3,500 packages.
Justin, reach out to me. There may be something GitHub can do to help there. No promises, but we have a key program that we're running.
Hey, so I was just looking at the document. So it's starting out with Ruby Gems for the top 100 most downloaded projects, authors. Is that right?
So it's the top 100 gems. All of the owners of those gems do have MFA required.
No, one thing, I guess, Jenny, when we were planning the rollout, we did it by dependence rather than downloads because we found there were a lot of false positives because some organizations can have large amount of downloads without actually being widely distributed in the supply chain. Did you look at both of those as options, and was there a reason to settle on downloads?
I think mostly the reason why we chose downloads is that it's really easy to measure. I think in the long term, we would want to require MFA on the general audience. So that would cover most of, I guess, the dependencies in rubygems.org and the transitive dependencies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because that was one of the things that got pointed out for us with some was like, if you're only protecting the top of the tree and some of the transitive dependencies are still vulnerable, but like from downloads, you should be good, because if the top one is downloading all of the leaf nodes, then they should all have larger download counts. The other thing for us is we're working towards high impact packages as where we're stopping for now on enforcing MFA. So that will be anyone with more than 1 million weekly downloads or more than 500 dependents. And like the kind of top 100 and top 500, which is the next to go out, was more like cohorts to roll this out, because we're doing a lot of investment in infrastructure at the same time. So like kind of, we were worried about keeping it up to date on top 100 because we didn't want to remove people from the program or like add people, and the logic behind that sounded really gnarly to try to work out. So we decided to just work towards like this bar that we're setting, and then you get over the bar and you're in. And if you're in, you're in. But and this could be good to talk about offline. There's a lot of edge cases around like, what do you do when people get added to packages, and making sure that we're introducing consent in invites, and all the invites inform people that like, hey, accepting this is going to change the way your account works forever. So there's a lot of interesting edge cases there to work through.
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah, like I think we decided on a download threshold. So yeah, once you reach that certain bar, then you can start getting warnings. And once you hit the required threshold, then you'll require MFA. Something that I did not think of is when owners are added to these gems. So yeah, very interesting to think about.
Yeah, so I'll chime in, at least the way that this is going to work for PyPI. I mean, because we're also introducing the ability for projects to turn a two-factor requirement on for themselves, even if they're not in the top cohort. The way it's going to work is that a user will just lose their ability to do anything on the project if they don't have two-factor enabled, or if they've turned it off, or something's happened. So they still like are listed as a maintainer and everything, but they don't have the ability to do anything that a maintainer can do. So that's how it'll work there.
Yeah, for now on NPM, we're putting people in what we're calling limbo, which is basically we invalidate all of your active web sessions, and we severely limit what your token can do. For these first cohorts, we're not limiting publishing, but pretty much anything else. And the idea was we just didn't want to break like continuous deployment or any infrastructure that people have set up. But we think about this as a bar that can raise over time. So as we bring in more cohorts, as we bring in more people, we may change, the rules of limbo. They're not set in stone.
And this is for the first cohort, or like first cohort and then everyone, and then you'll raise the bar, you think? Or
so we've implemented it directly in the registry. So if you are part of an enforced cohort and you don't have 2FA enabled, you're put in limbo. And so each subsequent cohort will have this behavior as well. And basically you try to log in on the website and it sends you right to the 2FA enrollment form. So you can't do any account maintenance, org maintenance, like basically anything aside from publishing is blocked. And another major reason for that is we didn't want to have like an incident where there's like a huge vulnerability that needs to get patched and then they can't patch it because they don't have 2FA. But longer term, we'll probably look at enforcing that for publish as well.
Trishank with his hand up.
Oh yeah, thanks. This reminds me of so I studied so for PyPI I had like a month of downloads, and we tried asking several questions like what would get you the best bang for the buck in terms of signing packages. So we looked at things like what you guys did, which is what was it that we looked at? I think it was even the top 1% of downloads, and you could cover a lot of packages that way. But more relevant to the conversation is one policy that we looked at. I know this is for signing packages, this is not for MFA, it's just for logging in. But something interesting we found was something that we called sort of abandonware. There are projects that are not frequently updated. They're no longer actively maintained, but a lot of people still continue downloading them. So one policy we hypothesized that we speculated, okay, in that month, if we saw anyone trying to upload a new package there, we would kind of put them in a limbo state where their old packages would continue to be downloaded, but you couldn't upload a new package. It's kind of the opposite of what you guys were talking about there earlier. Anyway, this is really interesting. Good. So
Is that an active policy or one you're thinking about?
oh, this is one that we evaluated. Unfortunately, it's not active, but I'm sure we could play with this ideas in the future. Let me send a link to that actually.
Are there any action items that we can take away from this? So it sounds like maybe a write-up of how PyPI and NPM are planning to do the features around this might be helpful for other ecosystems, like how when users come in and out of a two-factor requirement, how the repo responds to them. Would that be useful? Is there something else we could do here to sort of share them?
I think that'd be really useful, actually. Yeah, some consistency on the front. I mean, I think it'd be very useful to understand that a little bit more. The other thing that's fascinating to me is these sort of inactive packages or folks that are, we have things that are 15 years old, 20 years old now on Central that are still downloaded somehow. Nothing depends on them, whatever, right? And so really distinguishing between these different types of use cases is something that's really on our minds. And so I know, NPM, for instance, so the thoughts about how you identify the top users, right, to prioritize them for this program kind of speaks to that, what is an active user? What is a more active user? What is a more important project, right, from an infrastructure perspective? So
I'll just quickly say, I mean, we have a whole separate working group here, right, about determining which projects are critical. So maybe we can get some information out of them. But I see hands, so I guess I think Jonathan has up first.
When I was working for Gradle for a little bit, where I'm not there anymore, but there was a discussion between Gradle and GitHub because Gradle runs a package ecosystem, plugins.gradle.org, and they support, or that repository supports sign in with sign in with GitHub. There was a discussion around GitHub offering packaging ecosystems and an API for providing information about whether or not user accounts have two-factor authentication enabled. That's not something that the GitHub API naturally provides to many applications for a variety of for reasonable security reasons. So you can't, when you have somebody log in, you can't tell whether or not they're using two-factor authentication. But for the application of a repository where the sign-in is with GitHub, there's a pretty compelling use case there for actually this is a good place where an API would be useful. I know that probably people who are integrating like NPM, probably you guys can get that insight if there's a sign-in with GitHub offering. Is there been a wider discussion with GitHub around offering that to other repositories and other packaging ecosystems that offer sign-in with GitHub?
So I had my hand up. I guess that was convenient. I could speak to that question first, and then I had something else. It is not something that's currently available. It's something that we're looking at. We are long-term interested in a sign-in with GitHub for NPM, but would be blocked on the lack of this feature. For context, I'm a product manager at GitHub, and NPM is part of my area of responsibility. As we look at designing a lot of these features for kind of closely integrating GitHub and NPM, we are looking at building things in a way that would be built on open standards or infrastructure or things that could be used by other package managers rather than building bespoke solutions. So we are blocked as NPM on the exact same things that you're pointing out there. And there are conversations happening internally about, what it would look like to get something like this built. From my own research, I think that there's some stuff in the OIDC claim, in the OIDC spec. There's, I forget the type of claim. I'm not a Open ID Connect expert, but I think that that's the direction that we'd have to explore if we wanted to do this. There's definitely privacy concerns that would have to be worked through as well. But NPM is interested in this, and if we had it, it would be built in a way that could be used by other registries as well. And I've talked with Jacob also already about kind of what this would mean for cargo and crates. Yeah, ACR semantics. Thank you, Zach. That's what I was thinking about. So it's definitely like on our radar, but it is not something that's currently like funded, but it is something we're working through and trying to figure out. Like I personally, not GitHub, but I'm personally trying to figure out how to get that funded. The other one I was going to talk to is there was the discussion about like packages that are old and not used. We have two definitions internally that we use, dormant and squatted, which mean different things. Squatted package is one that's just been like published and has no actual functionality. And whereas dormant is just like has not been used in quite some time. And it gets a little bit complicated with a dormant package because arguably, you know, something can be written and do it really, really well and not require any changes because its complexity space is quite low. And so there's no need to really change it. So I get really concerned about any policies having to do with dormant packages, but I am very interested in things that can avoid squatting. But the other side of it is like the number one problem with squatting is that it takes up names in the namespace, and 99% of the time that people have a problem with that, their vanity, right? It's like, I want this name. It's a nice name. It's good SEO, not like, oh my God, you're stealing like proprietary something. So it's not like the highest priority, but it's definitely something that ends up with a lot of support tickets when people are disputing or want certain names.
Sorry, Miles, do you mind giving us your definitions of dormant and squatted again?
For like dormant in general, it's like less than 300 downloads. So like we have a rule about like deleting from the registry. If you have no dependents and you have less than 300 downloads, like that's like super dormant. That is even like a self-serve delete. But the second you have a single dependent or more than 300 downloads, it can no longer be deleted from the registry. And that annoys some people, but that's just kind of like where we're at. So like we treat the registry as immutable. If you have more than 0 dependents or more than 300 downloads, it's there, and it's, you know, unless there's malware, I like that would be a reason we'd remove it. But aside from that, like we don't really take things down. Squatted would be like that plus like no actual functionality to the package itself.
All right, cool. We've been talking about this for a while, and this is great. I do want to move on to other stuff. So I think we have at least one action item here, which is we're going to write up how the two-factor mandates are implemented in the ecosystems that have implemented them so far. Is there anything else we need to do here? Like, is it taxonomy of abandonware something that we should put into words, or is it simple enough that we don't need to document it like that?
If I recall correctly, NPM, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
If I recall correctly, NPM actually has some good blog posts about kind of their definitions and policies here. So just circulating those, Miles, might be quite useful.
Most of those blog posts are from prior to the acquisition, so we do need to do a follow-up, but that's a good call.
All right, let's move on to Zach and his doc on integrating Sigstore with package repositories.
Great, thanks, Dustin. So last one of these meetings, we came away with an action item. Basically, a lot of different package repositories were quite interested in integrating Sigstore, but there were a lot of open questions about some of the details of how to do that. If for the uninitiated, Sigstore is an OpenSSF project that basically does away with management by hand of user keys. And instead, it basically uses short-lived, disposable key pairs for signatures notarized against OIDC logins. So the idea is that you should be able to, as a sort of end user, verify a signature and verify that that signature was done by a GitHub account with a certain email address or so. The reason we're very interested in bringing this into package manager repositories is that in prior rollouts of package signing, using things like GPG X509 keys, et cetera. We've run into a lot of issues with developer/maintainer management of keys. That's generally a pain. Recovery is a pain. People, I don't know, leave their YubiKeys on the bus or whatever. And so this is kind of giving you some of that same authenticity, but tied to an OIDC login as opposed to tied to a manually managed key. Happy to chat more offline if anyone wants more clarity there. I came away with an action item from the last meeting, basically trying to lay out some of the issues around these integrations and how they should look. The big one that we had been talking about for a while was basically what identity provider should package repositories be using when they're checking signatures. And there's a couple of options enumerated in the doc. The main ones that we're interested in are the repositories themselves standing up an identity provider that basically attests to the I guess ability of whoever's logging in to sign a particular package. So this is really nice because it provides some pseudonymity, which seems to be an important desire from a lot of maintainers. The other options are using things like GitHub, Google, Microsoft, which are already supported. So I don't want to rehash the entire document right now, but there's a link there. Any feedback is welcome. I didn't mean for it to be in any way normative, just trying to lay out our different options. And already some folks have brought up some good points that will definitely need to be integrated into the main text. So I don't know that there's much actionable there, and most discussion should probably happen in that document, but I'm happy to take any quick high-level questions right now.
I endorse it, and I heartily encourage everyone who hasn't read it to read it. It's very helpful to see it laid out that way. In Ruby Gems, we laid out some of those options, but not all of them.
Cool. Well, I'm more than happy to move on. My email, I think, is in that document. And so if you want to follow up with me, happy to do that. Also, leaving comments, everyone should have access would be awesome. Dustin?
I was just trying to find the raise hand button. So I would like to discuss at least one thing a little bit with the group, which is that, like, I understand the need for, like, some projects might not want to fully implement an IDP, and that makes sense. And I think it also makes sense to try and decouple the identities from the actual software repository in the case that the repository is compromised, we can still trust the identities. I'm kind of still getting hung up on basically everything that's not an repository provided identity provider. There still needs to be some link here, right? Like the user needs to be able to go and say, all right, I've seen that there's a signature by this identity. Maybe it's on a neutral IDP, maybe it's a GitHub account, like whatever that is. There still needs to be some link between this entity that signed it corresponds to some entity on the repository. And I think I'm struggling to find the way that we can, like, completely remove the repository itself from this equation, because then we don't have to trust it. But I think there's always going to be that implicit trust. But I'm kind of curious if other folks have thoughts here.
Yeah, do you mind if I take a first stab at answering that? There's sort of two problems there. One is, how do we initially establish the link from sort of package name to the identities that are in charge of it? That I think is pretty straightforward. Right now there are accounts on the repository. Just as you'd transition to 2FA, you would also do a transition from not having any OIDC identities linked to a particular package to some account in charge of that package. Would log in and say link OIDC identity. They do their login with GitHub, and then now the repository has sort of a database mapping package name to package identity. This doesn't answer the really interesting part of Dustin's question, but I want to sort of get that out of the way. I would love to hear if anyone thinks there's anything particularly subtle or complicated in that. I think I see a hand, Jacob.
Sorry, Zoom has moved the raise hand button and now I can't find it. I'd like to, the way I think about it, I think I'm agreeing with Dustin here, is that as a user, the identity of who uploaded it is, it's an indicator of what I care about, but it's not what I care about. If they created a new burner email address to upload, I don't care as long as they are in fact someone who's allowed to upload and I should trust them for some reason. And so I think what needs to be in the public audit log is the auth Z of the registry. Why did the registry let this person upload? And anything you're going to need, because they OIDC'd with this user, we trusted them to be the person who was authorized to. This is an important piece of it. But the question I want a signature about is, why did you trust this person? Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, the other thing I'm thinking about is that trust on first use kind of doesn't work here. Like, if we just imagine that this is completely static ownership model, then yeah, that would be fine. But like in reality, maintainers are going to change. They're going to be like maybe removed from our project, and whatever the identity provider is needs to also, like, basically every time a signing or authorization event happens, needs to be aware of the like current state of that. So every time it actually needs to go and talk to the repository and say, all right, does this person still have the ability or the right to sign this? And it also needs to happen at verification time as well, right? So yeah, I don't know. That's the thing I'm hung up on about anything that's neutral, but I'm interested in finding ways to like not trust the repository at all in this equation. So I see other hands. I don't know who was up first.
I think Brian's hand I saw.
Yeah, I mean, this is an area I think given how Maven coordinates have been structured forever, has been the approach taken there since the beginning of time has been to associate the coordinates with the company or the namespace of the company that's publishing. It kind of solves a bit of that first publisher problem that you described. Like, how do you know this person is authenticated? And you know, from my perspective, over the past couple of years, this lack of association between the organization who's allowed to publish in the other ecosystems is the reason why we see all these typo squatting, dependency confusion, whatever you want to call it, like massive amounts of these types of attacks happening through this vector, because first person to show up and claim a name gets it. And I would love to see, you know, some deeper conversations of trying to adopt a model like that in the other registries. I mean, the pre-existing stuff notwithstanding, that will be a challenge. We went through that with Maven way back in the day. That's why you still have like JUnit and not org Apache JUnit, you know, but you got to start somewhere. And I don't think there's a scalable way to solve that problem unless you start really thinking about, you know, some type of namespace, coordinate, prefix, something that can then be automatically validated. And we've developed a lot of tooling at Sonatype that we'd be willing to share with people to help make that association easier to do, you know. And if we can make that a standard, I think it could really change the game. You still have this problem of, okay, given this organization, who are the user accounts or tokens or keys that are allowed within that organization? But at least you've established that link that I, Brian, can't just show up and start publishing Tesla coordinates because I have no control over Tesla, right? That's the real problem. And I think all of this has to start from that as the root concern.
Brian, can I ask a clarifying question? So in Java, if I recall correctly, packages are basically namespaced in like that reverse domain format. So there is in fact an organization for any particular package. There is one organization or it's complicated, right? That mapping, but roughly one organization that should be able to publish that. Is that true?
That's true. That's true. Although there's not a tight coupling between the Java package and the Maven group ID. They use the same convention for the same reasons. We're not currently enforcing the Java packages of a project, but we are enforcing the group ID that they publish. So you can try to typo squat something, but you can't do it under Apache or Eclipse or any other company's domain unless you somehow have hacked their ability to change their domain records, right? Which is a much bigger problem. And so that's Maven, because it kind of copied that reverse DNS, allowed us to do that tight enforcement and validation up front.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that's super interesting because that is not necessarily the case in other language ecosystems. So I think the next hand that was up was Jacques.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, I'm jealous of Maven for having that, being able to piggyback on an existing global namespacing system. But what I was going to comment on is my understanding of an earlier discussion, which was around tying who is the owner or maintainer at the time that the signature was made, and therefore was that signature from an owner or maintainer. One thing we looked at in the early RubyGems RFC design was that the signer would have to be somebody who's listed inside the gem spec. There's a field in the gem spec for email addresses, and since the original scheme was email address based, the idea was that you would only count it as a maintainer if it was in that gem spec. Some folks push back really hard on that. They pointed out that it means that they have to maintain the list of maintainers in two places, once in the gem spec and again on rubygems.org. So we more or less dropped that requirement. I'm kind of sad about that because it seemed like a really easy way to say, like, it was self-verifying. Like the thing that was signed had the claim about whether you could sign it. But as I said, there was a fair amount of pushback. Yeah.
Cool. So I am going to turn it over to Jonathan in just a second, but it does sound like there's a lot of subtleties and nuance around this particular question. So I think I will probably take an action item to try to add a section to the document that I linked, which spends currently way more time on the IDP question, sort of discussing these issues about
yes,
ownership.
I think that's important. I think, sorry, Jonathan. I think one of the things that I've talked about in the past is eventually developing a schema of events that happen in a repository. And that one of those events should be maintainer added, maintainer removed, so that you can, by reading the log, deduce who was a valid maintainer at a given point in time and whether to trust that signature. Because of course, as we all know, that the transparency log doesn't know that who is who. It will accept a signature record willy-nilly. And there's an obvious attack there, which is somebody can just stuff the transparency log with 1 billion signatures for an asset to cause the repository to choke. So there's definitely some need to be able to filter by who the maintainers are at a point in time. Thanks for your forbearance, Jonathan.
Yeah, cool.
It's totally fine. I've also spent a bunch of time trying to think about how to hack the supply chain of the Java ecosystem. One of the ones that popped into my head too is, the reverse DNS sort of thing works really great. But at least in the Java ecosystem for the longest time, there was Maven Central, which was kind of like the root. There was JCenter, which also lets you publish things. And then for the Gradle ecosystem, there's the Gradle plugin portal. I presume that there are other but like they're chained and you may resolve a dependency from any of those three repositories. I don't know if this similar sort of thing exists, for example, in the Yarn ecosystem, like for NPM and Yarn. Like, is there a Yarn repository that's distinctly independent from the NPM repository that you can publish things to Yarn? And okay, nope, I'm getting a nope. Okay, so I don't. So this may be just a problem in the Java ecosystem, but one of the things that I've spent a bunch of time thinking about is that, like, okay, who registers the domain first sort of problem, or registers the space first, but not in the context of not in the context of one repository, but like you could theoretically see, okay, somebody's publishing a package to Maven Central. I'm going to go typo squat the same package in the Gradle plugin portal because I'm going to be in the same namespace. But because the Gradle plugin portal doesn't know that package is going to be published and hasn't yet been approved and published in this other space, there's a race condition there potentially over registering and taking ownership of a domain that somebody else is going to take ownership later of, or at the same time of.
That's why I think it's useful to think about that registration, the registrar, if you will, almost as a separate thing from the actual distribution of the bits. In Java, Maven Central is effectively that thing. Yes, there were other repos, but you saw when Bintray shut down, there were, Joel, you had to deal with it. There were a lot of projects that had mishmashed, conflicts that we had to kind of figure out who the rightful owner was. in a manual way. It was not great, but it was the result of not having the central naming kind of universally used. But it really kind of comes down to what the users consider to be the central name. Nothing stops anybody from standing up a repo and convincing people to download packages from it. But the fact that that's not the canonical repo or an approved repo for those coordinates is something I think the users would want to know. And then that would at least let them decide their security posture and how they feel about fetching stuff from a ghetto shopping mall repository, right?
This is why I was really concerned when I heard that GitHub was creating a package repository. I'm like, are they going to be attempting to create their own central repository? Because then you end up with another place where and it doesn't seem like that's what the role that GitHub has tried to take on, is becoming a central repository. But, you know, if you have two central repositories in any ecosystem, you can end up with these sort of like, well, there's a race condition of who's registering where and you know, at what time and gets dominant ownership of that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it a little bit in that blog that I wrote. I mean, in a bit, what we've decided to do is lend that to the existing mechanism, which is the registrars for DNS. Companies fight over DNSs, and there's a process for that. We didn't feel the need to have to replicate that. And I think we can lean on that as it's an underpinning of the internet. None of this works if we can't trust the domain registrars. So at some level, I feel like there's something there instead of recreating the wheel. How do we connect those things? And 15 years ago, it was kind of annoying for people to register a domain to publish their new package. Nowadays, they can be had for pennies on the dollar, right? So it's not as big of a hurdle as it was back in the day. But importantly, it stops you from pretending to be somebody you're actually not.
I think I see Miles.
Yeah, I'll just like really quickly to the domain thing. Like, I'm personally not sold that it's the best way of doing verification. And I think there's a whole other thing about like what kind of verification we can do at a baseline to publish. I think one of the things to myself, and many of you may disagree, but one of the magics of the JavaScript ecosystem is like the low barrier to entry to get started. Myself, I come from a background in fine art, and I started with JavaScript because I was making weird art installations with light, and it was just like made sense to me. And so I'm genuinely concerned about introducing too much of a bar just to kind of get started that hurts people that don't have skills. Like I've been making DNS records for over a decade, and I still struggle every time remembering how to set up an A record properly. Now, with that said, it is very trustworthy to an extent. There was some chat going on about the expired domain hacks, and like that's actually something we've been dealing with NPM, where like people can scan the registry, find expired domains, and steal stuff. So like none of these things are foolproof. And I think, in the back of my head, I'm like, wow, it'd be great if we had something like that from the get-go, because then we would just like probably not change it. So if we had that great thing that Maven has, that would be awesome. But I don't think we can move towards that. But other verification methods are definitely something we're interested in. But at the same time, I want to make sure that it's something that doesn't like privilege corporations over independence, and like equally benefits the ecosystem without becoming one thing we've worried about, is it becoming like a sign off of like, hey, these packages are better. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of describing it, but it's like maybe they're more trustworthy, but it's not like a signal that like the quality is higher. And like playing that bar is difficult, or finding that bar is difficult.
All right, I'm gonna cut in. Sorry, I just want to be mindful because there's a couple other items on the agenda, and I'm pretty confident at least I could talk about this problem for the rest of the meeting and then some. So if I'll turn it over to Dustin, I guess, but my proposal is that we table this for now. I will try to spend some time over the next 2 weeks, probably doubling or tripling the length of that already long document and enumerating a lot of these concerns. I would really love. I'll try to get that done maybe a bit before next meeting, and I'll try to get feedback, especially from the folks who have been talking today. So Dustin, does that sound good? And then, yeah, definitely follow up with me offline if you would like to.
Yeah, so Zach, I'll give you action item to sort of revise or finalize that and respond to people's comments. I'll give a general action item to everyone just to read that. It's really a good write-up of the general problem here, and I think it could use some discussion just in the comments there. We could probably take a lot of this discussion there as well. Any other action items that we should pull out of this particular discussion? Okay, I want to move on to Brandon. Is Brandon here? Yes. Hey, Brandon.
Yeah. My internet connection is really bad. Here, so I'm calling in. Yeah. Don't want to go too much into details. But basically, Dustin and I and a couple other folks have been kind of putting this survey / landscape together. I can't share it, so if Dustin or could you kind of just share on the screen? So I think there's been a lot of input from folks, which looks really good. There seems to be some really good discussions and comments that are on the doc. So I was hoping to kind of discuss like some ideas on, that there were some discussions around like certain topics like typo spotting, what maybe you can break it down further into what are different mechanisms that can be done. Together with scoring, I think this is a fairly new area. And so I think we do want to get a bit more feedback and brainstorm a bit on maybe we can break down these categories into further mechanisms. And I think at the end of this, we kind of want to get together and take a look at it and be like, okay, what are areas that probably warrant a deeper discussion that we have to explore for the different repos. And Dustin and I are working on a blog post to kind of share a little bit more about this effort and to hopefully get other ecosystems that are not on this list here to put in their input here as well.
Yeah, so one thing I see is that PyPI and NPM aren't on here yet. So I'll take that as an action item for me, and maybe Miles, you and I can just sort of sit together and do this for both of our ecosystems. Is there anyone else that we explicitly want to include here that is not on this list? I think this covers everyone that's in this group right now.
There should be theoretically another package. The Gradle plugin portal is another artifact server in the Java ecosystem, so that might need its own column. It piggybacks upon the other ones, but it also hosts packages that are not in other places.
Does it have some
different
features? Sorry.
What?
I was going to say, does it have, I think Brandon can't see who's talking, but does that have significantly different features than the other?
It's implemented in a completely different way, and it's like its own. It has its own login, its own way of publishing. Its feature set is different. If for things that you can't resolve through the Gradle plugin portal, it redirects to JCenter, which then redirects to Maven Central. It's a completely separate publishing structure, or publishing mechanism. Having worked on the code for this thing, yes, it's different. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I was going to say is maybe this is also unique for Java right now is there's JCenter, which is a mirror of Maven Central, but also has other things inside of it that are unique to JCenter. But JCenter is also read-only, so it can't really change. So whatever state it's in now is like the state will always be in. And yeah, I don't know how that also plays into this. Of like, there's if you want to make things better, that's like an unmovable part of it.
So real quick, Jonathan, can I give you an action item just to fill out this column for the Gradle plugin portal, and then I guess Sterling, sorry if that's for the ecosystem you were talking about, or the.
Yeah, so it probably Jonathan used to be a Gradle employee, and so it will probably fall on.
Okay.
A Gradle person can come and fill in that column if you like. Jonathan's doing other things now.
Thanks.
I see Zach with a hand up, and then we have 10 minutes, so I want to move on to the last thing. But
yeah, I'll try to keep this high level. I was for a while trying to compile a pretty similar spreadsheet, and I found it pretty necessary to have separate the mapping between repositories and the tooling to interact with the repositories. There's no strict hierarchy there. There are tools that interact with multiple repositories. There are repositories where there are several tools for, and the features that they support kind of, you get a matrix and it's pretty complicated who supports what. So I suppose I would urge that spreadsheet to be factored in a way that supports kind of gathering information in that manner.
Do you mind working with me on that? I think I want to kind of understand what you had in mind and see whether we can
yeah, definitely. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah.
And sorry,
was that Zachary?
Yeah, that's Zach.
Yeah, Zach.
Okay.
We did miss a agenda item that I wanted to get to. So Marina, Brian, Zach, apologies. Do you want to take 5 minutes to talk about this real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I could do the very quick version. So this is kind of following up from last week. We were talking about some specific data that Zach and I were looking for about software repositories for a project. And then we followed up with Brian, and basically we're wondering if this group would be interested in having the Linux Foundation kind of be a steward for some of this data more generally, so that we can answer other research questions and have this data kind of available for research that can then improve software repositories overall. And we can answer questions like some of the ones listed in the agenda. I won't go over those. So basically the question is, would folks be interested or able to share data with the Linux Foundation for research purposes? And does that make sense to go within this working group? So the proposal is kind of to add data collection to the working group charter and kind of start with some kind of simple data collection that we could maybe do something useful with, such as daily upload download counts or this overall size of repositories. Yes, Teresa, so privacy concerns is actually one of the reasons we like the idea of hosting this under the Linux Foundation as kind of like a third party who can then be a steward for the data and make sure the PIA is properly managed and all of those things. So I don't know, thoughts, Dustin?
Yeah, I generally like it. So for everyone's awareness, PyPI has been hosting a public data, like the Google Cloud Public Datasets program has hosted a dataset for PyPI with download counts and statistics for a couple of years now. That works fairly well in terms of them hosting the data and us not having to pay for it. It doesn't work great for people that are, they get locked into BigQuery and they have to use that to run queries, and it's fairly expensive. It's a large data set. I think we don't have any plans to get rid of that, but it'd be interesting to roll that into some other data set occasionally, or package it up into something that's kind of more approachable. I'm interested in that very much. So yeah, I would like that. I'm kind of curious for other ecosystems, are there published data sets for these kind of things? Or is this new territory?
I know NPM used to, but I've seen some data sets from 2014, but I don't know the current state.
RubyGems has a daily dump of data.
Crates.io also has I believe it's daily, it might be weekly dump of data.
RubyGems is having daily dump of data from the data perspective of the packages and stuff around, and also is providing some kind of data parse from logs regarding daily downloads, grouped by some more entities like Ruby version and stuff around. So it's also public data sets, I think daily as well, maybe for the downloads of packages.
I'm going to second Miles' question here. So when y'all are saying data dumps, what are these? Where do they live? How do users use them? It's just files somewhere in storage, or?
So there's a daily database, SQL database dump, which is living on S3. There's a link on RubyGems page itself in a footer. And for the daily logs of the downloads, I think it's using Datadog or some service where you can also, it's publicly available, so you can download data in there.
Can I invert the question and suggest that what would be helpful is a target schema if ecosystems are being asked to provide data to a central repository? Presumably it's to a consistent schema that works across ecosystems. which I imagine is going to be pretty lowest common denominator. But as long as we know what it is, then we have a fighting chance of telling you whether it can be done or how it can be done.
I'll be honest, I would be satisfied with having data at all and having to figure it out for each schema as opposed to where's the data at all.
I mean, even if it's just a single table with a lot of columns, which are nullable, which makes me sick as a 3NF fanatic, but for reporting purposes, it makes sense.
So it seems like maybe there's also some overlap with the scoring critical projects working group. Like I imagine they probably care about a similar data set or would be interested to hear about it. So
it would be useful.
I don't know if anyone's also in that working group, but could someone volunteer to, Jacques? Yeah, maybe just have a chat with them about if this would be useful for them, and maybe we can work with them on a schema or like sort of figuring out how we could host this. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that, and also to volunteer Marina to do that as well. So we can take that as an AI to be a little bit more crisp about what the initial ask and plan is with regard to common data collection.
Yeah, and I can help with that also. I did some of that, and I also worked for Harvard on their analysis. So happy to help.
Very cool. Yeah. So it sounds like we'll talk with them and see where this should best live, but this seems to be general interest.
Cool. 2 minutes left, real quick. Let's, David, you want to chat about the charter?
Yeah, just real quick. Frankly, it's more of a question, which is kind of the status of the charters. Some written down scope. Sooner or later, we're supposed to create a here's the starter, here's the initial working group leads. Hey, TAC, please bless. And the sooner we get that, then the sooner we can make this an official group and such. I think there's general agreement. Hey, this is an official group. This should be an official group. I just want to actually make that happen.
Yeah, David. So I think if I remember correctly, we need to demonstrate 5 meetings of this organization along with a charter, and kind of like you said, the leads. We bundle that up, take that to the TAC meeting, get that reviewed, and then we kind of formally bless it, I guess, in lack of a better term. So I think we're at 4 meetings now. Keep me honest in terms of the count there, Dustin. But so I guess in 2 weeks we may end up kind of in a 2 weeks. We'll have the next and the 5th meeting, and then that's sufficient to take to the TAC meeting, which is 1 week later. But definitely good to keep on the radar just to finalize everything.
Yeah, I mean, if we could turn that securing software repo goals into, just add a little bit more and turn that into a charter, then let's. I don't think that the TAC is not, I don't think, going to be interested in grand formalism. Just we have some idea of what the group's going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm happy to volunteer for that. I won't volunteer Bob because he's already given so much.
No, that's fine. You can. We can knock it out together. I think you're supposed
so like
to
I was saying, Bob and I.
All right. So yeah, Jacques and I will take that action to clean up, check it on the box, or check off all the boxes, and then put that on the TAC agenda to get it blessed.
Okay, cool. And we're at time. There's a bunch of action items. Please just review them yourselves. There's a couple of people's names in there. It shouldn't be a surprise. Next meeting's in 2 weeks. It'll be an APAC friendly time zone, so shifted into the evening for Eastern folks. And yeah, thank you everyone. Good to see you all. Take care.
Bye. Thanks.